Welcome to another video, and today we're going to talk about how Clair de Lune is overrated. Wait, just let me explain. Look, I love Clair de Lune as much as the next guy. It is hauntingly beautiful. It's a piece that envelops the listener in its calm and serene soundscape. Every small detail, from the harp-like arpeggios to this chord movement that sounds straight out of the Lord of the Rings. And this part that sounds like Zelda. It truly is a piece full of wonderful musical treasures, but if I'm being honest, if I didn't hear it for the next 10 years, I'd probably be okay with that. I'm gonna regret this video. Look, there's definitely a reason Clair de Lune has such mass appeal with musicians and non-musicians alike. With that said, it has, in my opinion, become a bit cliché. In no way is it overrated, but is it overplayed? Well, maybe. And the thing is that Debussy gave the world so much more music, and it'd be a shame if we didn't give all his other great masterpieces some time in the spotlight. Today I want to talk about a piece very similar to Clair de Lune. It is a piano piece, and it happens to be my personal favorite composition of his. And that is Fille aux Cheveux de Lune, which translates to The Girl with Flaxen Hair. It's 2 minutes of pure musical bliss, and you won't regret sticking around as we're going to take a look at what makes it so great. So right away, you'll see the similarity with Clair de Lune. The Girl with the Flaxen Hair starts off with a single line to draw us in. Much in the same way that Clair de Lune starts off with those very sparse two-note chords. And we have this arpeggio that implies a G-flat chord, but there's also this E-flat, which implies an E-flat minor, making the tonal center a bit ambiguous in the beginning, but it doesn't take long for us to get a plagal cadence, or a 4-1. And the effect of that cadence is something that can only be described as this warm hug. Keep this plagal cadence in mind throughout, as you're gonna see it plays a huge part in this piece. Now ironically, the next measure we end up going to the 5, but notice how it resolves. It goes to the minor 3 and then the minor 6. To me, I think it's the first great moment in the piece because it introduces a bit of tension and interest to what has only basically been a 1-4-1 so far. And then this is followed by something very interesting, A5 to a 5 of 6 that resolves to a major 6, creating what you can argue would be a Picardy third in the key of E flat minor. The Picardy third, of course, refers to ending a minor section or entire piece with a major 1 instead of the expected minor 1. But as always, don't let the jargon or the terms get in the way. The important thing here is to understand the emotional effect of that major E flat. It sounds like a ray of sunshine, a ray of hope that cancels out the touch of sadness we had experienced earlier with that minor 3, minor 6. So after that E flat major chord, the melody gets reintroduced in measures 7 to 8, except instead of a regular old G flat chord, Debussy makes it a G flat 7. And this reharmonization is a common technique that Debussy uses, including Clair de Lune. If you look at the main melody of that piece, it occurs 4 times throughout, each time harmonized with slight variations of the harmonic progression underneath. Debussy uses that same technique here by putting that G flat 7 underneath, but instead of resolving it to, say, what should have been a 4 chord, he moves it up a whole step to A flat 7. And this was very much his thing as well. Parallel movement of 7s, but more generically chords that don't function or resolve as expected. Then we have this E flat minor 7, followed by the 5, resolving to the 1. Now remember when I said to keep in mind the central role that the plagal cadence plays in this piece, because if you look at that 5-1, you'll see that's not your typical classical 5-1 authentic cadence. Debussy actually uses what we would later classify in modern pop, rock, jazz theory as a dominant 11th chord, or a dominant 9 sus4 chord. His use of this chord is really quite special, as it's not something that you see in the music before his time, but you see it everywhere in modern music. Let's take a closer look at how this chord is built, and you're gonna see something very interesting. So the most common voicing of this chord, and the way Debussy does so in this piece, is created by building the chord up from the root. So you have the root here, D flat, the 5, the 7, the 9, and the 11. Now take a look at the top 3 notes. What do we have there? It's the 4 chord, C flat major. So we can argue here that the plagal cadence has been there all along. It was just hidden in plain sight. And indeed, the emotional affect is similar to that of just a regular plagal cadence. Compare those two to a regular 5. So completely different. Then measure 14 introduces a new technique called chordal planing or harmonic planing. Now there's different ways to implement this technique, but the basic idea is to take a chord and move it up and down in parallel motion. And this can either be with strict intervals, such as if you were to move in whole steps, or you can do what's called diatonic playing, where you move up and down, but only using the notes of a certain scale. And that's what's happening here in the left hand, where you have the triad and second inversion going up and down. And so this goes against traditional counterpoint and is used more for textural purposes rather than any sort of functional harmony. You've likely heard this applied in different ways throughout your life. For example, these horn stabs in Star Wars. Everyone's heard this before, but that would be an example of planing. In this case, this is chromatic planing, where the pitches are moving by half step. Then ending that chordal plating session, you have this G flat 11 resolving to a C flat. Now that's quite an abrupt key change, but this is something you'll see a lot with Debussy. Rather than gradually modulating to a new key and staying there for, say, an entire musical section, Debussy uses tonal key centers to color the music instead. As you can see, he abandons the key of C flat just as quickly as he entered it. Because in the next measure, we have these 2 5s with ninths, A flat minor 9 and D flat 9. that implies a resolution back to G flat. That's what's supposed to happen anyways. Instead, the second A flat minor goes to a B11, which, well, what do you know? It resolves to another new key, albeit one that we've seen before, E flat major. The 11 chord really is key here because it can do wonders for random key changes. It has this strong pull to it that you can go from, say, C major, and no matter how random the key, you can modulate to, say, F sharp super easily just by preceding the new key with a dominant 11. For an example, we're in C, and we'll modulate to F sharp. It won't sound out of place or jarring at all, because once you hit that 11 chord, it doesn't matter what key you're supposed to be in, your ear's only concern at that moment is resolving that 11 chord. Now let's see what that would have sounded like if we just went with a regular 5. See how that just seems so abrupt, unexpected, out of place? So what is it about the 11 chords that make them so effective with key changes? Well, if we go back to our analysis of the chord tones, as discussed, we have the 4 on top, the 4 chord, but the bottom 2 notes can be analyzed as the 5 chord without the 3rd. So what you have here is 2 chords, both expected to resolve to the 1. So you're getting 2 chords for the price of 1. Okay, so we are now in the key of E flat, and as expected, we don't last very long here. It's not long before we make it back to G flat. But the way that Debussy does this happens to be my favorite part of this entire piece. So here in E flat, Debussy implements this pentatonic idea that spans 3 octaves. So I get this E flat, the highest note in the piece thus far, but instead of an E flat chord, Debussy subverts our expectation with this incredible flat 6, flat 7, minor 1, major 4 chord progression. There's just something about that just screams, did it, we've made it, we've overcome. And so we get this incredibly juicy, triumphant sounding chord progression that he repeats a second time so that we get to hear it again, and my goodness, is it just perfect. Alright, so we were just in A flat major, and so it shouldn't be too hard to get back to G flat. Debussy uses this sort of skeleton D flat 11 chord here that resolves to a proper D flat 7 that goes into some more chord planing. And then one proper 2-5, 1 to end the piece. Except that's not what happens, my friends, because that kind of ending is for second-rate composers. No, Debussy uses what you would call a non-traditional deceptive cadence here, because instead of resolving to the 1 or the minor 6, he resolves to the 4 chord. Oof. And that, my friends, is my second favorite part of the piece. And I don't know what you guys feel at that moment, but it can only be described as this moment of catharsis. As if to say, wow, look what we've been through, and we did it. And you can really see the weight that he puts on this chord because he holds it out for an entire 3 measures. And over that, he reintroduces the melody. This time, an octave above, creating this awesome effect. And not content with the pseudo-deceptive cadence to the 4, he fully realizes that deception by going to a minor 6. And it just gives the piece this feeling of tragedy right at the very end. Does technically resolve to a G flat, but doesn't really feel like a satisfying ending at all. And sure enough, Debussy does not end it right there. What we get next is some more chordal planing, diatonic planing, and then this rising fourths figure. Then in analyzing the ascending pentatonic fourths, you'll find that it forms the pentatonic scale not of G flat, but of C flat major. So we most certainly do have a plagal cadence here. And then we finally come to rest on the 1 chord in the 4th to last measure. Debussy adds a final touch to the piece with these broken octaves of D flat and G flat, as if to say we are finally at the end. A stunning piece indeed, and one that I think can go toe-to-toe with Clair de Lune. But as always, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Comment below, let me know which Debussy piece is your favorite, although I think I already know. Now we'll see you all next time.